Hi, everyone. It's Mary Luehrsen, the NAMM Foundation Executive Director, and welcome to this important gathering on music and social justice, a case study in creating a diversity and inclusion alliance. It's lovely to have you with us on this Tuesday, wherever you are, and we're grateful for folks that are logging in and telling us where they're logging in from. It just means a lot to us to know where you're joining us from. Um, those of us that have joined us in other webinars, you will soon be able to recite our antitrust disclaimer probably with me. We always start with this formal outline and it's very important to NAMM and the way we conduct our webinars and our gatherings, that we are very aware of antitrust requirements, and we do not discuss competitively sensitive information concerning prices or the marketplace in general. And we invite you, if you're interested, to review our antitrust statement that's available at namm.org. We'd also like to remind you that although we have a gathering of very important academic people and people in the business community, we do not provide professional development credit for this gathering, but that's something that we are considering for the future, and we'd always welcome your comments about that. I'm very delighted to have with us an incredibly distinguished panel today addressing this important topic together with the full Alliance. I believe almost all the Alliance representatives are here on the call, but representing that Alliance are Dr. Elizabeth DeLamater, excuse me, who represents the PAS Alliance chairperson, Dr. Jillian Baxter, also with the Alliance, Albany State University, Heather Sloan, with that Indiana University, and I love the term independent scholar, something to which someday I would like to ascribe to myself, as well as Joshua Simonds, who is the executive director of the Percussive Arts Societies in Indianapolis, who I think I could also ascribe the independent scholar, and all that he knows and guides and helps. And welcome to our panelists. It's so great to have you with us. I just want to provide a bit of an opening context. The NAMM Foundation is engaged in this fall webinar series, and this is the third meeting in webinar in our music and social justice topic. We felt really inspired, compelled, committed to engage in this topic relative to the concerns in our society at large at this time, and our also firm belief in the role that music and music organizations have in advancing a discussion and indeed solutions to the concerns that we have within our society and for marginalized communities, or for people that are otherwise feeling disenfranchised or not engaged. Clearly at the core of all of NAMM's efforts is a firm belief in the power of music to heal, to unite, and to lead ideas forward. And in that essence, we have created conversations about music and social justice. This is the third, I said, in a series of the two previous are recorded and are available, and we certainly urge you to view them and to share. And we urge you to participate in our conversation today. We will feature a breakout after our opening conversation with the panelists, and the breakout will be joined by other members of the Percussive Arts Society Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, and we encourage you to meet with them and to share in questions, very open-ended questions. So, and finally, before we go right to our panelists, I would like to say that in the spirit of these conversations about music and social justice, we have endeavored to lean into a subject where we hope that we will all feel at the end of these series of conversations more empowered to have conversations with our own communities, in our own organizations, and our own networks. That as we prepared for this as a team, I'm often reminded of what Claire Krieger-Boas, who is heading this initiative, said, that we will do this work humbly with the need to continually learn. And it's really in that atmosphere that we open up our conversation now. So I welcome Heather and Joshua and Elizabeth, and I hope you can all see them on screen. Welcome and thank you so much. Heather, I understand it all sort of starts with you. And there was something that you endeavored to create for the organization when you came on to be aligned in the leadership of the Percussive Arts Society. But before I actually jumped a step here. Before we do that, I'd love to do a quick round robin and let you all introduce yourselves. Let's do that first. Quickly, get kind of what your role is professionally, how long you've been involved with the Performing Arts Society, Percussion Art Society, and at the end, Joshua will let you do a quick thumbnail on the society itself. So Elizabeth, let's start with you as the current chair of the Alliance.
Hello, yes, I'm Elizabeth DeLamater. I've been involved with the Percussive Arts Society since probably 1984 as a student, and then as a college student, and then professional since the 90s. I recently became the chair of the Diversity Alliance this past January. I am an independent scholar and a professional percussionist in usually the orchestral and Afro-Caribbean musics and West African music.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dr. Baxter, love to hear from you from Albany State.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Jillian Baxter, coming to you from Albany, Georgia, where I'm assistant professor of percussion at Albany State University. I first joined the Percussive Arts Society back in 1995 as a student as well, and just been enjoying being a part of the organization. I came on as point person of gender concerns in the Diversity Alliance this year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Heather, bit of your
Hi,
background.
thank you. My name's Heather Sloan. I have also, like Elizabeth and Jillian, been a longtime member of the Percussive Arts Society. I spent a couple of terms as a World Percussion Committee member and was the inaugural chair of the Diversity Alliance. My main research area is music of the Dominican Republic, Afro-Caribbean drumming, particularly joined with environmental concerns such as deforestation. I work at Indiana University in the Media and Maps departments.
Thank you. And Joshua, quick update from you and a bit about Percussion Art Society.
Sure. So Joshua Simonds, the Executive Director of the Percussive Arts Society. And for those that are unaware of the organization, we are the professional membership of drummers and percussionists worldwide. Next year, 2021, will be our 60th anniversary of the Percussive Arts Society. And we essentially have four major aspects of what we do. We hold a convention each year called PASIC. It's the largest gathering of drummers and percussionists anywhere in the world. We have a museum in downtown Indianapolis, Rhythm Discovery Center. And then we, in two other areas, educational resources and interactive experiences. And we can get into that a little bit later, but thank you, Mary and Claire, for having PAS and members of our Diversity Alliance here today.
Thank you, and I love your background. And also, Heather, I love your background. It looks like there's some, and you too, Jillian, look at those wonderful instruments. And Elizabeth, I know there's some rich musical things behind you in your office. So it's, you know, there's a downside to not meeting in person, but we also get a glimpse into people's passionate zones, right, where they do their remarkable work. So now I'll jump to Heather. I believe that this initiative and this way forward for Percussive Arts Society really started under your thought leadership. Can you tell us about the early days and what was the energy and the impetus for this alliance effort?
Sure. Well, the first two words that I need to say are Julie Hill, because she was my main collaborator in beginning this. And basically, one of the things that we noticed was that we really were not as a society using all of the resources, and by that I mean human resources, available to us within the society. It started mainly with looking at representing more women in clinics, in leadership positions. And we had a few meetings at Percussive Arts Society, at PASIC annual meetings and conventions. And mainly it started out as listening sessions. And I think I want to make sure that everyone hears that, because many times I think we start with a goal and we think we know what needs to change. And I would recommend on this journey that listening be the first step. So we had informal meetings. We took guidance from anyone who joined those meetings. There were many questions that came up. We formulated those questions and then made an attempt to strategize and to make connections to people who might be able to answer those questions. Joshua very quickly became a big part of this. Once we figured out where the main areas of challenge were, that's when we formed the subgroups. We made resources available, such as project charters, to start very small projects in the areas that we needed to foster, and from there it grew. So that basic foundation was listening and informal meetings, and building small projects, doing more outreach so that we could lay that foundation for larger projects.
So what's the timeline for this? When did this all begin? When did the quote unquote listening tour, right, or the gatherings to represent the needs?
Well, if you're gonna ask me for a year, I'm the worst at remembering years, but I just stepped off and handed the baton to Elizabeth this last November. And so the first formal meetings would have happened just about 3 years before that. So it was a process of about 3 years of laying that groundwork and taking baby steps and then bigger steps and bigger steps. So it took some time, and we took our time to make sure that we were headed in the right direction.
So it started with conversations on what we would say kind of the membership level or the grassroots level, right? And then
Exactly.
did it go up to like being a board committees or subcommittees of the board, or you know, how did it relate up to the governance of the organization?
Well, that's another place where Julie Hill was very, very important, because she had a foot in membership and a foot in leadership. She's a PAS past and had a better idea than most about the various layers of organization of the society. And so as we started to gather both qualitative and quantitative data about what was needed, Julie was really able to communicate that to leadership as she was part of leadership. So communicating with boards and the executive director. And that is a key point that I would like to point out as people look at this issue in their own structures, in their own organizational structures, that having a line of communication, whether it's a Julie like we had, or some other structure, a group of people or an individual that really can communicate between leaders and membership, that's a very important communicative bond to have.
Mm-hmm. You know, and as our listeners are with us today, you know, we do hope that you can sort of, you know, kind of start modeling how maybe some of these ideas could work for your organization. Again, that's why this is such a great case study that we're so happy to share with you. And I think, you know, many service organizations, I've said this in an earlier webinar, many service organizations look to their diversity policies or their diversity programs relative to who they're serving, and realize that over time, you know, the real weight of diversity is actually up through the leadership and the organizational governance. You know, it's important to know that that is also part of the diversity profile that you know, ultimately is hopefully can be achieved. Joshua, I'd love to turn to you. How did these, what was the process to get these conversations started at the board level and the executive level, and, you know, and with donors, with the wider community? how did this become part of the genuine, authentic profile of what Percussive Arts Society was seeking to work on?
Sure. I think, as Heather mentioned, and cut out maybe for a second. So Julie Hill, that she mentions, was is a past president, but at the moment was actually still on the executive team. So we actually were fortunate to have her there. But even still, there was still some dissent amongst that. There's a lot of uncomfortableness around that. Even from when Julie was bringing it to, right? Because it was just new and people didn't know how to react to that, right? Your first reaction is usually defensive. Well, we are diverse, right? We're the most diverse organization already. Okay, and so there were definitely these conversations. The board then, they really actually, and I appreciate they do look to me, because on a daily basis, my job is to work for PAS on a daily basis. The board of directors are volunteers, right? They are there for governance, but they said, well, what are you hearing from the membership, right? And I was able to actually say, well, this is something we need to address. We kept, instead of always playing defense, maybe we should start playing offense and, be more proactive. And so it quickly became a constant conversation that we had in a safe space that that was a very important thing. Like, okay, it's okay not to know the right thing to say or how to say it, but ask the questions, and how come I don't? And we had that safe space to be able to start to ask those questions. And quickly people started to realize, all right, we might be a diverse art form. That doesn't necessarily mean that we are a diverse organization. And
yeah.
that was a very, and there was a lot of light bulbs. So
yeah, what a remarkable switch to flip, right, with an organization that through a series of kind of open conversations and people willing to lead those conversations, and the fact that reaction of defensiveness is a one of fear, right, because we really don't know what the answers are, but we want to know, because I think, and also music is a diverse art form, so therefore we feel, yes, we don't have to deal with that problem in the same way.
correct.
When we go, I invite people to look at our very first webinar on this series, where we had the wonderful person from the upswell independent sector with us, Habib Baku, who talked about this humanness, that our reaction, right? Our reaction is very real and human, and we need to accept that as a kind of a starting point, and then go, as you said so well, that our art form is diverse, but maybe our organizations aren't as diverse as we want them to be.
Yeah, I think real quick, the last bit, people who serve as board members, that's a lot of time, and they take their job on on that committee very personally. So that's the other part, is that there is this, like, you're attacking, like, are you saying that I haven't done my job well? And it's this, no, we haven't, maybe you will do it well. We haven't even done it. And it would say, you haven't done anything wrong, but we can start doing things right now. And that was last, but there's a lot of people take this organization, it's very close to everyone here.
Yeah, that's great. And only in 3 years. I mean, it's three-ish years. So I'd like to jump to Elizabeth and Jillian in terms of what new resources or assets did the organizations need? Now that includes point of view, right? Or a little bit of programmatic organization to really, move this goal forward. And Joshua, I invite you to jump in as well. But Elizabeth, can we turn to you on that?
Sure. First, the new resources that we needed time, talent, energy from the staff. So the Diversity Alliance is 309 members now who are all volunteers. Yet we would not be able to ultimately carry out our work without time, as I said, and work from the paid staff. And Joshua, that is quite an investment. And Joshua can speak to what that literally is and how that happened. But we now have our own web page, and the resources we create, they live there. That's just one example. So Joshua, do you want to take that from me?
Yeah, I think it has to do with priorities, and that shift became, okay, so we talk about concentration of resources at our organization a lot, right? Even as this large membership organization, we only have a certain budget and certain staff and not so much time, but this became a priority, and therefore it became a priority of board, myself, and then the staff as well. So yeah, so we've had to shift some things along. We don't do some things anymore, but this is a priority now. And so therefore you have to think about, what as an organization, you might have to think about what are you doing that maybe isn't giving you the ROI that you need, and what you should be doing is this, and what can you kind of get rid of that isn't as important right now. So people say, I don't have the time, right? We hear that a lot. There's no time to discuss this. There is time. You're not making this a priority. So
Right.
we made it a priority.
For organizations, change and engagement and the work that they choose to do needs to be intentional. And I think that you're an expression of the intentionality here. And it comes from the way staff is managed. It comes from the way things are identified, right? And and it's a great representation of that. Jillian, I'd love to hear from you. What is happening in the organization that is different? What feels different? What different feeling? What goals are being achieved because of this initiative?
Yes, one of the big things when you talk about the subject of diversity, that's a very large topic. And many organizations, are coming forth with diversity and inclusion kind of topics or statements. The one really great thing about the Diversity Alliance, if you think about, like I said, the subject is very large. So we do have, multiple subcommittees within the Alliance, surrounding different elements of what we consider to be diverse, so that no one person or one subject matter is tasked with having to cover every possible thing which is diverse. What you think about that, that's a lot to try to task. So that's one of the great things about the Diversity Alliance. We do have multiple subcommittees, which you'll get to hear and see some of those different subcommittees later on. But things that, I definitely hear as a balance of this initiative, if you look at the events of this year, we've had a lot of different things across the country that have shook people's feelings and things of that sort. So what I've heard from many members with this initiative and the many subcommittees pushing forth the goals, meaning we want to make sure we represent all types of people in the organization, more people are coming forth and saying, I want to be a member of the Percussive Arts Society. Even people who may have been members in the past and may have let their membership fall off, but they are coming back and seeing some of the work of the organization and saying, I see what you're doing. I think I really want to come back and be a part of that. So a lot of positive things from people all around. They're just excited about the representation that we're providing.
So who is represented in the Alliance? Can you name some of the subcommittees that are operating?
I will attempt to name a few, and don't let me mess up. Mine, of course, is gender concerns. We have racial issues. We have African American concerns. We have the queer concerns. We have leadership, socioeconomic. We have secondary education. I believe we actually even have a younger education group. Joshua and Elizabeth, you can definitely save me on a couple of the others. There's so many.
Special needs and accessibility, religious, professional opportunities. So like you talked about, diversity is, I think people just go right to maybe racial or gender. But as Heather mentioned earlier, it started by that. right? It started by gender, especially in the percussion world. That was, there was a group, and I would say where Heather said, okay, when did this start? And you said, oh, maybe 4 years ago. I would believe it probably started 60 years ago or longer when PAS first started, and that, the stories you hear about, a lot of the women at PASIC would always get together, and there's lots of stories from women and members of, Teddy, who would be one of the breakout with the HBCU directors, right? They would still support and be there, but they didn't feel there was really a place or acceptance, and so while this alliance is here now to help, it really started long time ago, just with Wella talking, and now it's front and center. And the other thing I want to say is, for people who are out there, we call it a diversity alliance. This is really just a committee. And the reason that we call it an alliance actually has to do with PAS and our bylaws. Our bylaws state that a committee has turnover and term limits. And we decided, well, we didn't want the diversity committee to have that. If you felt like you wanted to be part of this committee, this group, you shouldn't ever have to leave. And so therefore, from a governance standpoint, we said, okay, let's call it a diversity alliance. It acts very much like a committee. We just can't call it a committee. But
that's something that I'd like to, we've got some great question about the policy. So it seems that this was a policy discussion, not to call it a committee, so people didn't have to, roll off. That this was something, a policy was set that if we're going to do this, it's going to be a permanent volunteer position for people to get in, dig in, and work.
Yeah, and you should never have to, right? It's that I want to be part of the Diversity Alliance forever.
Right.
And now our leadership, our point people, they may rotate and give new people and the chairs, but in terms of being a member, showing your support, being an ally, 100%, never have to roll off.
Maybe Elizabeth and Joshua, a good question, or Heather too, all of you actually, what other policies did the board and the organization pivot on or transform with based on the development and the input from the Alliance? And how has it changed the organization from the policy perspective? We can talk about its visibility perspective as well, but first of all, from the policy.
Heather, do you want to talk about anything that was noteworthy earlier?
I think one of the things that happened early on that was really important was, and this has to do a little bit with some of the stuff that's going on in the chat right now, addressing language, addressing ideas of inclusion also, because diversity does not necessarily mean inclusion, that the inclusion part has to be intentional also. I think there were things that were small as, hey, all of the people that we have on our website that are playing percussion are currently white. That's not representative of who is playing percussion in the wider world. Why don't we change that? That particular got fixed, I think, in less than 24 hours. So as you said, Mary, visibility is one of the things that can change. You could argue that that's a cosmetic change and doesn't make very much difference, but I think in terms, there's a lot of data to say that people who are able to see someone who looks like them, however they define that for themselves, doing what they love to do does make a change. And Joshua and Julie and I worked to sort of have some of these discussions formed as panels. That started to happen where we started formulating the idea of having diversity related panels on different subjects, smaller projects that were aided by the donation of a booth in the exhibition hall. That was one of our greatest initial changes that happened, was that we had a visible presence in terms of not just meetings, but also panels, small presentations that we did at the booth. And we just started to be able to have more of those conversations that moved things forward.
Right.
Elizabeth, follow up to that?
Yeah, it's gone it started with those small things, and then because Heather is so patient, and she and Joshua showed us the example and showed everyone the example of this needs to main case of listening to everyone. For example, listening to people in the chat right now. It is important for us to listen to others, and then we don't necessarily need to be defensive. We can all learn and improve together and make or continue to make this a society for everyone, a place of inclusion. And so now the conversations that we used to dream about happen on all levels of the organization. They don't just happen in our meetings or our emails. So sometimes they'll happen with other committees. We have liaisons with all the other committees, and we have relationships with the leadership, but I know they already consider things. There are things considered with outreach activities and with our international competitions that never used to be. So that might just be compositions that now they make sure that composers our compositions in the competitions are not just all by white men. The people who are put on in leadership positions now, we're getting to have a more diverse participation. Sometimes change does happen slowly, but it's happening, and we're just going to keep going, and we're never going to say, okay, isn't that good enough? Aren't you happy? To someone, anyone. We're going to just keep making sure that we try to have this true place of inclusion.
Right, and I think I think what's the reaction is that maybe our work isn't happening fast enough, but the work is happening as fast as we can make it. And I think that, and there's a long way to go. There's certainly a long way to go. I want to just move to the point, each of you personally. How did this change your perspective personally? When we look at the mindset of diversity and inclusion, we have to start with ourselves, and we have to start with our own personal journeys and our ability to have conversations with patients with dignity. And how did this process change you really with only the last 3 to 4 years of this serious work? Jillian, I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Personally, for several years, just growing up, I kind of became used to being the only person who looked like me in a section, a music organization, definitely the percussion section. And when I went to early PASs, PASICs, so to speak, from year to year, people would always remember me. And I thought, that's really neat. But then I realized that the reason I was so rememberable was because there were not that many people that looked like me. So I kind of stood out. And I think, several decades ago, that it didn't necessarily bother me because I grew accustomed to that in society, but it did make me, question. People have already mentioned about being heavily dominated on one side or the other. And I did feel the percussion field was a very male dominated world, and then even more specifically, more white male dominated. And seeing the diversity initiative, I actually started to see more people who looked like me coming to these big organizations, going to chapter events, and I felt more comfortable. I had more people to link to, have conversations that were relative to maybe me as well. But then just, conversations in general from everyone kind of started to be opened, because I think we as a people, meaning the world, can sometimes be fearful of offending. So I personally just, started to see more people that I could link to, I started to feel more open with having conversations, and then also realize there's way more people out there who feel just the way that I do, just by having the conversation, and they don't have to look like me as well. Um, so that's kind of personally just opened my eyes to a lot of people really want to be a part of each other, but in some ways we're just scared to say something because we might say the wrong word and offend you and you get mad. And that's happening probably global wide. And so we've started here to have a lot of conversations. And like I said, I found a lot of allies. I feel more comfortable. You know, I'm not offended pretty much by anything our group would say. I'd rather us have a conversation. What word do you want to use? What do you want to be called? You know, we're become very open with that. And that makes me feel more comfortable just being a part of the group, and adding to the group as a whole.
And what a remarkable asset for the organization, as it does consider its policies and its programs, you know, if this dialogue is taking place. Elizabeth, what have you learned along the way personally? Again, these reflections are really important to all of us who are growing personally. It's just as we try to impact our organizations.
I've learned, I'm still learning how to be an ally without inserting myself into the middle. Because as a percussionist, I experienced quite a bit of harassment, sexual harassment when I was younger in performance situations. But the reality is that as a white cis woman, my situation is not as bad as many others' situations still are. And so I had to get over myself. And then now I'm still learning how to help everyone, help lift up everyone, and ennoble everyone without getting in the way.
I guess it's that humility we spoke about at the beginning, right? There's so much we don't know, so much we don't want to understand. We do want to understand. You know, when I work with a lot of music organizations on this subject, I'm not a inclusion expert, but I hear and I feel their desire to move in this direction, right? And I think because of their own personal desires and transformation. So how do we, what do we do organizationally? And this is an example of it. Heather, how about you? How has this helped you to grow and transform on new understandings?
Well, I consider that a something that I continue to do every day. I think humility is a huge part of it. One of the things that has really changed for me is that how can I put this? It's very important to understand as a white person or a person with privilege when taking on this work that the framework must not be, I am helping these people that have less privilege than I do. I think the framework really, really needs to shift so that we all understand that there's a cultural poverty that happens when we don't have inclusion, when we don't have equity, when we don't have diversity. It's a poverty that affects all of us. And so we may be thinking that we're helping someone else, but as in whatever level of privilege that we have, but we're helping ourselves. And the listening to others isn't, oh, well, I'm inviting you to come into this conversation. To me, it's more like, I need you. I need to know what you have. We all need each other. That to me was a very important shift to make.
Yeah, and from that perspective, you start building and revising policies and bylaws for an organization. I think that's really pretty important. Josh, we'll end with you. How has this changed you and helped you on a journey as a leader in the arts and culture field?
Yeah, I think it's quite humbling. And I think what I've learned the most is that if you're running an organization, you can't effectively do it without a group like this, right? You can't do it effectively on your own or with a board. You have to have your members. You have to have their voice constantly be heard. You have to make the time. You have to embrace everyone's voice. And you have to take action that, you know, I think when things happened in May, you know, it was, and Teddy and I had lots of conversations. You know, it was about, there was lots of statements, right? And people right away came to us and said, statement isn't good enough for this organization. What's our action going to be? And since then, we continue to try to show that it's slow, right? We're not here to say that, we're not here today to say, look at PAS, we've done this correctly and we have the, we know exactly what you should do and here are every single policy. We're here to show a case study, as you said, the starting, where it's going, what we're doing. We're not here to say that we are doing it 100% right and we're going to get it right all the time. But we are saying that we are actually, that there's action happening. You know, we are taking active steps to make our field, the percussive arts, better. And that it's a journey and it takes time and it takes people who care. And we have that, you know, and so we will continue to do that and continue to improve every day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to our panel. Honestly, this is the journey I wanted to take with you, and it was very, very effective because I think, again, people who are in organizations, leading organizations, choose to make a difference in an organization. There are a lot to model here, both personally and organizationally. So thank you. So we'd love to hear, we're just going to take a few minutes before we wrap up on time. If any of the groups, and we see a lot of the Alliance team members were in the breakouts. So we'd love to see if anyone would just like to volunteer. You can raise a hand on screen, raise your hand in the participants box if that's the way you like to go, and if there's any conversations that you'd like to share with the larger group or from the breakouts. Who's on first? Here we go. Ralph Hicks, go for it.
Someone's on screen. You want Sean? You want to take it first? Go ahead, bud.
Was I on? No, I think they were pointing to you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. My bad. Well, Ralph Hicks, I'm sorry for the faux pas with the title. We originally named our group Special Needs just to be a placeholder. No one intended the name to stay, but it stayed way too long. So we actually are the accessibility committee. So today will be the one and only time that we will reference ourselves as the Special Needs Accessibility Group or subcommittee. But we had a great conversation. I got to give a hands up to Heather bringing up the verbiage part. Just I think the biggest part that I am personally going to try to take from this session was just being more mindful of my privilege and being more mindful of how I address certain issues, especially issues that don't concern me, that just because I may not be part of that group doesn't mean I can be insensitive to it just because I'm not affected by it.
Yeah, the great lesson of the 21st century, right? The real work of this time. Heather. Heather, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I wanted to quickly say, one of the things that I have been paying attention to, and this is a lesson that I've learned from other people, is when whoever was reading the chat and heard or read, is it Tita? Is that how you pronounce her name? Okay. Tita is pressing us to move faster. When you read that, pay attention to how that feels in your body and your mind, and don't go away from whatever the feeling is. If someone says something to you that you're not ready to hear, if someone calls you out on something that you're not ready to be called out on, pay attention to what happens in your mind and body in that situation. And don't go away from it, turn towards it. And you can probably even feel it again if you go back to the chat or think back to another moment where that happened. Recreate that feeling and learn to be able to be comfortable in that feeling, to be able to still think, to be able to still connect to your heart and mind while that is going on. Because that fire that she has, the desire for change is, we really, really need that. But it can be difficult to be in that space if we're afraid. So I just wanted to put that out there. Our bodies, we ignore them a lot, and it's very important to be connected to those things because it will tell us a lot about how we're responding to a situation.
And as happened in the chat, Heather, I think that there was an inviting to a conversation, right? I mean, I think we, but that's wonderful advice, but we also saw emulated in the chat an inviting to a conversation, right? I mean, help us to move forward. But yes, I agree that pressure to go faster, we have to embrace that too, regardless if it makes us uncomfortable or not.
Mary, Jamie had her hand up earlier.
Great, Jamie, love to hear from you.
Yes, they, them, their hand up. So I just want to have like an initial comment for a reaction, just like from what we watched. And then we had like a question that I think would be beneficial if we could think like how to answer. I'll start with the question because it's easy. But is there some way someone who's in a situation where they're the few people of color in where they work, how can they bring up issues to their superiors who are all white? And if they're in a situation where they would be nervous about it, like, is there a template? Is there, just some advice we can offer to help them in situations like that so they're not one person against the entire brigade?
Yeah, very, very basic question. Is there anyone on the Alliance that could help us with that?
Well,
John or
I'll
Teddy?
do what I can. Let's see. As far as, well, I've been through that, and so one way, if you know a person that's on that staff, go up and ask them how they're doing. Is there anything that they're concerned about? And they'll probably open up to you because, quite frankly, no one's probably asked them anything. They've just been carrying it day by day and just dealing with it, doing the best they can because they don't want to offend. It also depends how long they've been there. I've been a member of Percussive Arts since '85. I think it wasn't until '95, '96 where I felt like I wanted to say something, where I felt comfortable enough to say something about the things that I disagreed with. As I look at, what would have happened if I could have said something earlier? I'm looking at the results now that have just been amazing to me. As I see Teddy, as I see Jillian, I was by myself most of the time in meetings, and myself and Pedro Ore, we were on committees or trying to get on committees and not even allowed. I remember going to a committee meeting, sitting down in it, and someone asked me, "What are you doing here?" This was at the PASIC convention. I had paid $200 and some, whatever it was, and it was said open meeting. And that's I'm not going to mention what committee it was, and it was a long time ago. But I thank them because that changed my attitude. Because I said, well, that's the last time that's going to happen. And so I started, making some things known and talking to different people. But as far as being in that situation, if you see that person, maybe nothing's wrong. Just ask them how they're doing. And if they feel like they have someone they can talk to, they'll open up about it. And maybe together you all can make some small changes that need to happen that may help everyone there. So that would be the easiest way.
Thank you so much. And, in terms of addressing leadership, again, I can take a note from the advocacy point of view is we want to create change in places like Congress or our state legislature or in our organizations and our school boards. It starts with a conversation. It starts with a relationship. It starts with developing a conversation with someone said, do you ever think about, or are you concerned? I sense that you are concerned about, right? And then you are able to have a conversation and gradually lead to the change that likely you both want to create. Jamie, did you have a follow-up?
I do have one more thing I want to bring up, and it was something that Elizabeth mentioned when she was saying how she's trying to be better about listening. And I noticed that in that she put her harassment to the side. And she said that like that was something she went through, was being harassed. But, and she might not meant to do it like this, I needed to put that aside to lift up my people who are minorities. And I want to just bring the attention to that women are still minorities in percussion, and harassment is not acceptable. And those are conversations that still need to be had on top of everything else. And for her, like, it just made me sad, and I'm getting like super triggered that she thought that that was something she needed to do. And if she thinks that, other women think that their problems are not as important, and being harassed is a problem. So I just wanted to bring that up and let that go being said, because I don't want someone else in a situation like that.
Yeah, I think maybe Elizabeth, I don't know if you'd like to address that, but as a woman in the music profession and looking back on my early developmental years, I don't know if I would, it probably was, it was definitely a form of discrimination. And I guess what I had to do personally was to move through it, not to put it aside, but to move through it and see it as a building block to my own service in the world that I hoped to have. Elizabeth, would you like to follow up on that? Great comment, Jamie. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Jamie. That I'm not surprised to hear that I misspoke. That yeah,
No,
it's
and I don't think you misspoke. I just want to let you know it's just as important.
well, thank you. Yeah, it's it actually is kind of what Ralph said also. It's even if we do have valid experiences, and even if we have been marginalized or injured ourselves, there are so many other of other people who have experiences. We are better if we listen. We are better if we decenter and unite. And so if I just hang on to my own experiences and stay and don't work through it, don't move through it, then I will stay closed off, and I can't hear, and I can't work with others, I can't help lift them up. I can't let them lift me up, and then we are not an inclusive society. So.
Yes, well said. I know we could go on forever, and I hope that all of you that wish, we'll leave the chat open if you want to share emails privately, if you want to share your contact with each other. There's a lot of rich connection. I'm just so grateful for this. Joshua Simonds, I'm going to turn to you to give us a final thought. And maybe what's next for Percussive Arts Society in this really vital area with such profound input from these remarkable people?
Yeah, I mean, every time I get an opportunity to sit with the members of the Diversity Alliance, it really touches me a lot. And so I really appreciate everyone taking the time to, it really means a lot. I mean, you can't always assume what everyone has and what everyone is dealing with, in the back, but every one of these people deal with, and it's such an amazing group of people. I will say that if you're watching this, whether right now or later on, if you go to the PIS website, which is pis.org, you can actually find under Get Involved, there's a Diversity Alliance page, and actually all of our point people are, all their emails are actually listed there. You can get in touch with all of our point people directly, and we love the conversation. And PIS, we want to be that leader. I think broadly because we want to show people that, change can happen. And as percussionists, as I mentioned earlier, we are a diverse genre of music, right? And our organization will continue to be more diverse, but we want to be that change. And so we're showing people that we want to be that change, and that you can do it too. And I know there are a lot of people here who didn't get to talk, looking at Colleen and Becca and Emily and just so many people who do great work who are committed to the Diversity Alliance. And so what's on more of this, you're going to see more roundtables, you're going to see more hard conversations. We're not going to be afraid to put out there. It's not always, as my daughter says, you know, rainbows and unicorns, and like it's not. The world is hard, and we're gonna talk about those hard things, and you need to talk about those hard things. So I hate being the last word, actually, because there's so many amazing other people here. But thank you to you and to Claire and Elizabeth and Jillian and Heather for the panel and all the point people here. You know, I will make a plug for PASIC. You know, our online convention this year. If you've never been to PASIC before, you can come this year because it's virtual, and our Diversity Alliance, Jamie, is actually moderating a great panel. So keep watching our social media pages, because our Diversity Alliance is going to be strong, and we're going to keep putting information out for people to learn from and continue these conversations.
And I think we should all try to convene there at PASIC at your Diversity Alliance meeting. So thank you again, Heather, Elizabeth, Joshua, Jillian, for your wonderful thoughts, the great group of the Alliance here, for all that you contributed. We've got some other upcoming webinars we'd love to share with you about. You know, we worry an awful lot about our next generation, our college students. We're all in our fall webinar series, all leading up to our Believe in Music Week, January 18, where we'll continue our music and social justice conversation. But coming up October 22nd, we worry about our college and university students that are going to be the future of music. So we're going to have a careers in music conversation with them October 22nd. We're also working in the health and health and wellness, music's role in our health and wellness on October 29. We do have something very important coming up soon. In the beginning of November, our public affairs group will put together a post-election analysis, what's ahead for music and arts education, the arts and cultural realm. We have a nonprofit management institute seeking to strengthen our nonprofit music service organization. We know this is sort of fundraising season for them, so we want to give some technique and updates. And also we'll be on to our Gen Next career development. This is with collaboration with the College Music Society, helping our music majors understand what's next for them. All leading up to our Believe in Music Week in January. So please pre-register for that. Also, we have a great collaboration with the independent sector. That is opening tomorrow. On their virtual forum. There is a complimentary registration that you can register with Upswell. They have some remarkable speakers. Claire, just give us a rundown.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I wanted to just briefly say, so they're on, I think it's tomorrow, so register today. Ibram X. Kendi is their keynote speaker, author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Isabel Wilkinson. And then we have sponsored Bernie Williams, who will be doing an interview and a performance, and Jay Dash, who will also be doing an interview and a performance. And this code gets you free admission to the conference. Highly suggested. All of these topics that we've been talking about with some real major experts, heavy hitters in the space.
I encourage you to look at their website on the topics that they've put together. Very, very committed to the COVID recovery, the period of COVID recovery, reigniting and re-energizing community, and addressing directly the other health concern of our time, which is systemic racism, and really addressing it head on. We're very honored to be included and helpful in that. So again, leading up to Believe in Music Week, please consider starting your new year with us the week of January 18. Activities every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They all kind of coalesce around the bigger, the marketplace events and the industry events on Thursday and Friday, but a lot of things will be coming your way. So if you register now, you'll be first for free. It's free registration. We'll also be doing a fundraising program for a variety of music charities to be determined and all being worked on. We're working as fast as we can